But first, to the worldwide fallout from the deaths of 7 aid workers in Gaza, including Australian woman Zomi Frankham. A tragic incident that quite rightly should be condemned and thoroughly investigated. But 6 months into this war, it's astonishing that the following needs to be reiterated. Hamas is the enemy here. Hamas is the enemy. It started this war on October 7 when its terrorists mercilessly murdered more than 1,000 Jews, tortured and raped women and took more than 200 people hostage. Around 130 are still being held captive. Many, though, are feared dead. But this week, it felt as though Israel was made to be the enemy. Now, let's not downplay the deaths of the aid workers by an Israeli airstrike. The Jewish state says it was a mistake and should not have happened, and its report is due to be handed down within the next 24 hours. But Labor should think about where its outrage is being directed and not let this tragedy change Australian policy. Here was Anthony Albanese ramping up his rhetoric.
Zomi Frankham should have been safe, and her being killed in this way is a catastrophic event. And what isn't good enough is the statements that have been made, including that this is just a product of war. This is against humanitarian law.
Labor's top-down continued the attack this morning.
It's not good enough just to say shit happens, that this is war and that people are going to die in a war zone. It's obvious that Israel is not doing enough to protect the lives of innocent people. So we do need a full investigation here.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong went as far as to say that unless Israel changes course, it will continue to lose support. She walked back those comments today, saying Hamas has no place in the future of governance of Gaza, amid concerns from Jewish leaders that Labor's opposition to the terrorist organisation may wane. What does Labor want? For Israel to cease operations and walk away while Hamas refuses to release Israeli hostages? To allow Hamas to control Gaza and continue to its crusade to wipe out the Jewish state? Israel is fighting for its survival against an enemy so morally corrupt it uses innocent civilians, including children, as human shields. Any suggestion that this week marks a turning point in the war, that it's now somehow Israel's fault, is dangerous. All deaths in Gaza since October 7 are a consequence of Hamas's actions. Barnaby Joyce got it right.
The turning point in the war would be for Hamas to release all the hostages. No one's life comes back, and that's the absolute tragedy of this. Obviously, Hamas as a terrorist organisation wouldn't be offering condolences or compensation. And you know, it's a horrible set of circumstances over there. We have a war going on, and these tragic events occur in wars. That doesn't make them right. That doesn't make it any easier.
Nobody is condoning the deaths of innocent people. The deaths of civilians on either side is tragic and should be condemned. Yet for the left, it's always Israel's fault. Their silence to condemn Hamas is deafening.
We need a permanent ceasefire. It's why a short-term pause is not enough. It's why the world's patience is growing thin. It's why Australians overwhelmingly support a ceasefire.
Where are the left's calls for Hamas to lay down its arms and surrender the hostages? They are nowhere. Where is the Me Too brigade calling out Hamas for raping Jewish women? They are nowhere. And there was no such commentary from the PM either.
Australia has called for a humanitarian ceasefire. We have voted that way at the United Nations. I've issued multiple statements with the Prime Minister of Canada and New Zealand, as well as with ASEAN leaders.
To suggest Israel is disregarding civilian lives is a baseless accusation. As Greg Sheridan wrote in The Australian, that Albanese and Wong should recall that there is not a single war in which Australia has participated in which our soldiers, among the finest in the world, have not inadvertently killed some civilians. This is an ineradicable part of the gruesome truth of war, which is always horrible and full of grief, but sometimes unavoidable. Everyone wants to see this war end, but a permanent ceasefire would see Hamas remain in control in Gaza, putting Israelis and Palestinians in a dangerous and uncertain position. More innocent lives would be killed as Hamas only supports the total elimination of Israel. Hamas is the enemy. Let us not forget it.